What if I told you there is documented historical evidence suggesting that Jesus of Nazareth did not die on the cross, as we have been taught? What if the foundational event of Western civilization, the death and resurrection of the Christ, was actually a cover story for something far more complex? What if ancient manuscripts, hidden in jars in the Egyptian desert for 1,600 years, tell a completely different version of the events that occurred on Golgotha? A version not of supernatural resurrection, but of survival. If you have ever felt a deep unease when hearing the traditional narrative of the crucifixion, if something in your heart whispered that pieces were missing from this puzzle, your intuition was right. You are not crazy to question this. In fact, scholars from Oxford to Harvard, historians from the Vatican archives to the universities of Israel, have quietly raised the same questions for decades. For almost 2 millennia, the Church has built its entire doctrine on a specific event, the physical death of Christ. But what if that event never happened? What if the resurrection was actually a resuscitation? What if the greatest miracle wasn't magic, but advanced medical knowledge possessed by a secret society of healers known as the Essene? Today, we are going to open the forbidden files. From the secret testimony of Roman soldiers to the lost medical texts of Qumran, from the strange behavior of Pontius Pilate to the mysterious tomb in Kashmir, we will connect the dots that the Council of Nicaea tried to erase. Prepare yourself. The history you know is about to be real. To understand the deception, we must first look at the official timeline. It doesn't add up. Crucifixion was a Roman masterpiece of cruelty. It was designed to be slow, agonizingly slow. The historian Flavius Josephus, who lived in the 1st century, documented crucifixions in gruesome detail. He writes of victims lingering for 3 days, sometimes a week. Death came from exhaustion, dehydration, and eventual asphyxia when the victim could no longer push themselves up to breathe. But Jesus, according to the Gospels, he was dead in 6 hours, or even less. This speed is medically anomalous. Even Pontius Pilate, a man who had ordered hundreds of executions and knew exactly how long it took a man to die, was shocked. Mark 15:44 tells us, Pilate marveled if he were already dead. Why would an experienced Roman governor be surprised? Because it was impossible for a healthy young man to die of asphyxia that quickly. Unless he wasn't dead. Then there is the procedure. Roman law required the crurifragium, the breaking of the legs, to hasten death. Without legs to push up, the victim would suffocate in minutes. But when the soldiers came to Jesus, they broke protocol. They left his legs intact. Why? The Gospel says it was to fulfill prophecy, but history suggests it was an order to ensure his survival. And then the spear. John 19:34 says, a soldier pierced his side, and immediately blood and water flowed out. This is the smoking gun of forensic pathology. In a corpse, the heart stops, blood clots and settles. It does not flow. But blood and water suggests the separation of plasma and cells caused by severe trauma, a body that still has circulation. The flow indicates pressure. Pressure indicates a beating heart. The spear didn't prove he was dead. It proved he was alive. The Essene conspiracy. To solve this mystery, we must look at the Essene. The Essenes were a mystical Jewish sect living in the desert. They were the authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls. But they weren't just monks. They were renowned healers. They were the best doctors in the ancient world. Their name, Esioi, likely comes from the Aramaic word for healer, Jesus or Yeshuis, widely believed by scholars to have been initiated into this sect during his lost years. The Essene medical texts found in Qumran describe advanced knowledge of herbs, resuscitation, and induced comas. They knew how to create a sleep of death, a state of deep metabolic suspension indistinguishable from death to the untrained eye. Now, look at the vinegar sponge offered to Jesus on the cross. Immediately after drinking it, he gave up the ghost. Too fast. Too convenient. Was this vinegar, or was it a potent Essene anesthetic, a mixture of mandrake and opium designed to slow the heart to a near stop? And who comes to claim the body? Not the grieving mother, not the apostles, who had fled in terror, but two rich, powerful members of the Sanhedrin, Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus. Men with Roman connections. Men with money. And what do they bring? 100 pounds of myrrh and aloes. John 1939. The church says this was for embalming. But 100 pounds, that is enough for a pharaoh, not a carpenter. It would fill the tomb. But in the medical texts of the time, myrrh and aloes were not just for the dead. They were powerful healing agents. Myrrh is an antiseptic and painkiller. Aloe promotes rapid cell regeneration. 100 pounds is exactly the amount needed to pack a full-body cast for a man suffering from severe trauma and blood loss. Were they burying a corpse? Or were they treating a trauma patient? The Gnostic texts suggest that the resurrection was a carefully orchestrated rescue mission. The Gospel of Peter describes Joseph of Arimathea preparing the tomb before the crucifixion. The tomb was not a grave. It was a recovery room. But if Jesus survived, where did he go? He couldn't stay in Judea. The Romans would have hunted him down. A resurrected insurgent is dangerous to the empire. He had to disappear. He had to go where Rome had no power. To the east, to the lands of the lost tribes of Israel. Ancient traditions from Persia to India tell the story of a holy man named Yuz Asaf, which translates to leader of the healed or the shepherd. He arrived from the west. He bore deep scars on his hands and feet. He preached in parables. He claimed to be a prophet of the children of Israel. In Srinagar, Kashmir, there is a tomb, the Roza Bal. Local tradition held for centuries before Western scholars ever arrived says, "This is the tomb of Jesus. Inside, there is a stone carving of footprints. The footprints show scars, but not just any scars. They show puncture wounds consistent with crucifixion, and crucially, one foot is nailed over the other. Why would a Muslim or Hindu saint have crucifixion scars? They wouldn't. Only one man fits that description, and we have physical evidence closer to home. The Shroud of Turin. While the carbon-14 dating is debated, the forensic pathology of the blood stains is revealing. Dr. Pierre Barbet and later forensic pathologists have analyzed the blood flow. Blood flows down. The stains on the shroud showed that after the body was taken down and laid horizontal, blood continued to pool. Dead bodies do not bleed. The heart stops pumping. The blood stains on the shroud suggest a body that was in a state of deep coma, but with a faint, beating heart. The resurrection was the awakening from this coma. The Bhavishya Purana, an ancient Hindu text, describes a meeting between the king of Kashmir and a white-robed holy man who calls himself Essene Jesus the Messiah and says he was born of a virgin. The dots connect across continents. Did Jesus live a long life as a teacher of wisdom, finally resting in the Himalayas? It challenges everything we know, but it aligns perfectly with a man who was a bridge between worlds. So why don't we know this? Why is this version forbidden? Because of Constantine. In 325 AD, the Roman emperor needed a unified religion to save his crumbling empire. He didn't need a human teacher who survived execution and retired to India. That wasn't useful for controlling the masses. He needed a god. He needed a supernatural deity who conquered death, who could be used to terrify subjects into obedience. A god who demanded sacrifice. A god of empire. So, the narrative was standardized. The Gnostic text, ones that spoke of Jesus as a human master, the ones that hinted at the survival, the ones that emphasized inner resurrection were burned. The heretics who held the original truth were hunted down. History was rewritten by the victors, and the human Jesus, the Essene healer, the traveler, the man who beat the empire by outsmarting it was erased, replaced by the imperial Christ. But the truth is like water. It always finds a way through the cracks. The Dead Sea Scrolls surfaced in 1947. The Nag Hammadi Library surfaced in 1945. The earth is vomiting up the secrets that Rome tried to bury. Does this destroy faith? No. It transforms it. A Jesus who survived by wisdom, courage, and the help of his community is not less of a hero. He is more of one. He showed us that death is not the end, not because of magic, but because the spirit cannot be killed. He showed us that the resurrection is not something you'd wait for. It is something you do. It is the awakening from the sleep of the matrix. The tomb is empty, but not because he flew away, because he walked out. And if he walked out, so can you. This version of history changes everything. It shifts the focus from a death cult to a life science. If this resonates with you, if you feel the vibration of a truth long forgotten, it is because your soul remembers. You don't need a God who died for you. You need the wisdom to live like him. The kingdom is within. The exit is open.